I wanted to start with a song that I wrote when Anne and Alan Quay were leaving. I think they had been here 20 years or 25 years or something. And I just think Unity is just a very remarkable place. It's a very remarkable organization. There is something sacred about this, and it really does have to do with vulnerability. Because in Unity, we don't have a lot of dogma that can be resisted. It's pretty much just love and acceptance. And sometimes it's a little loose. But I remember I had written a song to some words. It was the James Dillett Freeman prayer that we say at the end, prayer for protection. And I had played it for Alan. He said, "That's great. Why don't you come to our service one time?" And we were doing it I was studying A Course in Miracles over in the other building. He says, "Come to the service." I come to this service, and I just could not believe how yummy it felt. I was like, "Oh, this is nice." It's just nothing going on. There really was nothing to resist. And they were both so open to me. I just felt that this was an experience I had had before. Years ago, I had followed a guru, and we used to meet every night, and we would talk about our experiences in meditation. It was called satsang, the company of truth. And I never understood satsang because I didn't really agree with anything I heard. But I would get so happy. At the end, I would feel so happy, and I would just feel so... I just couldn't understand it. I was like, this is weird. I didn't even like that person's what they were saying, but why am I so happy? And because it was basically just love being shared. And I felt that when I came here. I actually did. I felt like, oh, I remember this. This is like satsang. And so I wrote this song, and I thought to sing it again because I'm feeling this way again. I felt this way, I had some resistance to Jennifer when she first came, but she was very, very open and loving to me and very accepting of me. And Cheryl, more of the same. I mean, I get this feeling like, oh, this is why I came to Unity. I remember this. It was the love. So anyway, it's called More Than I Can Say. At a time of great uncertainty and little peace of mind, I remember seeking something and not knowing what I'd find. When my path with all its turning led me somehow to your door, well, I knew that day I'd be coming back this way for sure. There is something so inviting in your smile each time I come. When you wrap your arms around me, I feel the beating of a drum. In the light of your acceptance, all my worries fly away. Made a home for me, and I thank you more than I can say. And a home is where the heart is, where you bring your burdens to rest, where the truth is always welcome, and love can bring out your best. In the hardest of times, you still extend kindness, trusting what you see. give the opening heart a new place to start, the freedom just to be. If our path should ever lead us far away from where we stand, with 1,000,000 miles between us, it wouldn't be a foreign land. For you've taught me to be open to the love I find each day. You made a home for me, and I thank you more than I can say. And I thank you more than I can say. Thank you. My lesson this morning is called "My Vulnerability is My Strength." It sounds like a contradiction in terms. Most of the time we think of vulnerability as our ability to be wounded. So the idea that you take off your bulletproof vest and then go into a barrage of bullets doesn't sound like something anybody would want to pursue. But as with most things that are true, sometimes it's a little paradoxical. I remember I'm looking at different cases of my being vulnerable. One of the things that happened to me, I've been in bands my whole life, pretty much just before the Beatles until forever. But one of the things that happened in all the groups was that people always used to say, "Jimmy, don't sing. Don't sing. No, Jim, don't sing. Don't sing. You don't sing. We have singers," because there were always people with better voices. And then I was in this big 10-piece band, which was fabulous. It was right in the heart of Motown glory. Like every song on the radio became a classic. It was between 65 and 68. And there were 10 of us in this group. Well, we had 3 singers, and they could really sing. And also, partly that was that it was African-American, it was Motown, so I wasn't the greatest Motown singer, but just don't sing was the message. Don't sing, don't sing. Then I was in other bands, and they were like, yeah, don't sing, no. But, you can write stuff, but don't sing. And I sort of bought it, like, okay, I could see these people had better voices and higher ranges. And then I remember I was so impressed. In 1971, I heard Carole King put out her own album, Tapestry. Remember this? I was like, she'd been writing for years, and all these other people had sung her songs. Great songwriter. But she put out that album, and there was a lot of vulnerability in it. She doesn't have the greatest voice in the world, but it's her voice, and she just sang it. It was a huge, huge hit. Almost everything on that album was great. And I was inspired by that. I thought, I can sing. I'll sing the way I sing. And it sort of works. So the reason I think my singing works is because I am vulnerable. I know some people are kind of like hoping I make that high note or something. I'm sort of putting it out there. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes my voice squeaks and I can't tell what's going to happen. It's not like my strong instrument. But I do think that's what engages people. That's what has people connect. It's exactly that. It's your vulnerability. And it's hard. You sort of have to combine vulnerability with truth. I don't think you can just be vulnerable and don't say a word. While all of these things that we talked about in the meditation, about just being the openness and allowing things to be there and feel what you're feeling, all that thing is wonderful. That's kind of mindfulness. But you have to go even beyond that. You have to be willing to tell the uncomfortable truth, the truth that doesn't make you look so great. And that is not always easy. Because what if somebody doesn't like it? Or what if they say something, it hurts your feelings, and then you'd have to feel those feelings. So it's quite understandable why people put up, especially since all of us have had a certain amount of things happen in our childhood that were unpleasant, that we have this resistance built in. But if you don't do it, it has very serious consequences for your life. It really affects your fulfillment if you're not open. If you don't become, it's really sort of what do you identify with? I remember talking to a client once, and he wanted to know what he could say if he saw this girl who dumped him, so that she wouldn't think that she had gotten to him. And when I said, well, do you really want her back? He says, yes, very much. I really miss her. But you could tell that was because he was the dumpee. Before then, he wasn't sure at all, and doesn't really want to be with this person. But having been dumped, all of a sudden she looked terrific. And if she was with another guy, that was even worse. But I remember thinking, I can't help this person come up with a snappy phrase. It's sort of like adding to the resistance. It's adding to the imaginary self that you would like someone to. It's understandable. I have the same thing. It's called ego. But the real answer is the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes it's saying what you're afraid of. I remember when I first started doing any kind of clinical work with people, I got a job at DC Public Schools as a school psychologist. But I wasn't trained as a school psychologist. I had a PhD in psychology, but I really wasn't trained at all as a school psychologist. But I interviewed well, and they hired me. But I remember feeling horrified that, what am I supposed to do here? Okay, well, you'll be testing these children. Now, you know how to do the Stanford Binet, right? And the WISC for children, the WISC-R, and it's like, what? And I just remember thinking, I don't think I can go much farther here. I get that it's nice to be accepted, that I got the job. So I remember I went out with this woman who was going to kind of show me the ropes. And it was so scary, I just said to her, can I just tell you something? She said, sure. It says, I have no experience. I have absolutely no experience. I don't know how to do this. And I was very embarrassed to tell her that. She says, well, how do they hire you then? I said, I don't know. But I am here. I'd like to not get fired, And she said, don't worry about it. Watch how I do it. And she took me around with her that first week, and she showed me how to give these tests. And I actually got to be very, very good at it. Testing these little children, intelligence testing. And I had other skills that I could bring from my own training. But I just remember that had I not been vulnerable, she could have just reported me get rid of this guy. This is obviously a mishire. He's been at this 5 minutes. But she stayed with me and she mentored me. She was just wonderful. And I do believe it was because of that vulnerability. It was my willingness to be judged and whatever that kind of made it work. Sharon Strand Ellison said, the problem with armored self-protection is that we think it will help us, but instead, it is the separating from ourselves that creates the very suffering we're trying to avoid. When we give up defending ourselves, our own prison walls come down, and we experience the love that we already are. It's really profound. When I work with people, a lot of times they say to me, a lot of my work has to do with forgiveness. Well, people say to me, I'm not forgiving him. I'm working with a couple, say. They say, I'm not forgiving him. Why not? Because that would be saying that it's okay what he did. So their strategy is, by not forgiving him, he won't be able to hurt me again. It's ridiculous. People who you don't forgive continue to hurt you. You have no protection. It just seems like you would. Doesn't it seem like it? If I forgave you, that's pretty much giving you the green light to do it again. Well, that's okay. But it's not that. You forgive them for yourself.
That willingness to be vulnerable again is what puts you back in the present. I don't know if you get this little thing from Mike Dooley. Does people get here? Tut. If you haven't signed up for it, it's very cute. It's The Ultimate Thought, tut.com. Anyway, he sends you a little message, an email every day, and it's very irreverent, but it's a message from the universe. And listen to what he said. He said, "You can rest assured that those who have hurt you had absolutely no idea what they were doing and what was really going on. It never occurred to them that you'd become even more magnificent, that they'd be invoking your sympathy, adding to your compassion, and increasing your sparkles. And it will still be eons before they can grasp that you actually welcomed them into your life and played their little games for some of these very reasons." He's always turning stuff on its head. But if you look back, you can see that sometimes that is how you develop compassion. Your openness and willingness to actually feel your feelings helps you to understand what other people are feeling. Madeline Longle said, "When we were children, we used to think that when we were grown up, we'd no longer be vulnerable. But to grow up is to accept vulnerability. To be alive is to be vulnerable." It's really the only authentic state. Yes, you're open for wounding, but you're also open for pleasure. If you shut yourself off from one, you sort of shut yourself off from the other. It means that you can be open to bounty and beauty. So don't mask or deny your vulnerability. It's your greatest asset. This is from Stephen Russell. "Be vulnerable, quake and shake in your boots with it. The new goodness that has come to you in the form of people, situations, and things can only come when you're vulnerable. That is, open." So it really has to do with, it really is about identity. What are you identifying with? What is the part of you that can feel hurt, that can feel scared? It's really your imaginary self. Who you really are isn't afraid of anything, because it's not in that place of judgment. It's just acceptance. There's a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron. She's really wonderful. And she wrote this thing. She said, "I used to have a sign pinned up on my wall that read, 'Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible in us be found.'" So what does she mean by that? Exposing yourself over and over to annihilation. The thing that you're exposing to annihilation isn't you. That's what you're letting get burned off. That isn't really you. That's your ego, that's your imaginary self, that's your fears and your beliefs. You let those get burned off, and then you find that thing inside of you that's solid, that nothing can touch and harm. And that is where you can identify. That's what's real. She said, "We think the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart again. They come together and they fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all this to happen. Room for grief, room for relief, for misery, for joy. What if you could be that space where all of this could happen? What if you could open yourself to that? Sometimes I feel that, someone once told me this, that you have an ego, and then you have your highest self inside. And the ego always speaks first. Always grabs the mic first. I have something to say about that. And it's just like, I've got... And if you let that say its thing, afterwards there's something like, how do I really feel? Because that thing that jumps out wants to defend and resist. and it's afraid, and it's based on fear. And it still hasn't forgotten anything in the past, nothing. So it compares everything that's coming with what was in the past, and it can get very easily triggered. But when you pull back a little bit and you rethink it, there's something that's peaceful inside of you that comes forth that has much more wisdom than that. Our daughter recently told us that she wants to go live with her birth parents. And you can imagine my first, like, what? Where are your parents? But she's connected with them, and that's what she wants to do. And the first thing that grabbed the mic wasn't very pleasant. A terrible idea. But I don't know. Maybe that's exactly what she needs. And I texted her because I heard that she had left California in a program that she was in. And I said, I understand that you've left that program and you're making your way back east. And I said, no judgment. That might be the best thing for you. It was neat. She texted back. She said, I didn't want to tell you. How did you know? I should say, well, it's partly because you post everything on Facebook. But I don't know. That feeling of just accepting, like, well, that's what's going on, like, as if I could control it anyway. I don't have any really control over anybody. But it's very different when you accept and allow whatever's happening to be happening without doing anything with it. And I very quickly could see that maybe this is exactly what she needs. Maybe that's the path she needs to be on. What do I know? There's nothing to defend. And it feels, that's it. I am at peace with it. And I don't know what's going to be. None of us do, But if you don't let yourself be open, if you don't let yourself be that openness, you can't experience any of it. It says, one of these things from us, this is from Stephen Molyneux. It says, exercise the power of vulnerability. When you're vulnerable, you're signaling to your system that the past is over and done. You're no longer a victim, that you're no longer trapped in a destructive and an abusive environment. Vulnerability means it's over. It's done. The war is over. But if you continue to use the same defenses that you had in the past, all you're telling your body is that the past is not over. So be vulnerable, be honest, be open, and show your heart. That's the best way of telling your heart that the tigers are no longer in the grass. I'm telling you, just take it for a spin. Vulnerability and openness will get you what you want in your life. And hiding will only get you the feeling of being prey from here until the end of your life. So how do you practice this? It's an interesting concept, but how would you practice it? I'd like you to do a little exercise with me right now, okay? If you can, sort of pair up with somebody. If you can't, it's okay, but try to pair up with somebody, just whoever you're sitting next to, and choose one of you to go first. It's easy. This is not a difficult exercise at all. Choose somebody to go first, okay? Okay. So try this, okay? The person who's going to go first, say this to your partner. You ready? You never listen to me. Go ahead. Okay. Now, the person listening, try this. The person listening to it says that, that's not true. I listened to you. I'm listening to you right now. I just heard everything you said. Go ahead. Now, I want to ask something of the person who said you never listened to me. Do you feel listened to right now? See what I mean? Yeah. Okay. One person says, you never listened to me. And the other person says, I'm listening to you. I heard everything you said. I'm listening to you right now. Okay? But you'll notice that in doing that, there's kind of a resistance there. It's like a not accepting this. Now try this. The same person, again, look at the same person again, and the first person say, you never listened to me. Now that this time, the one who just heard that says, I probably could do well with working on my listening a little better. Try that. Okay. Now, how did that feel when you heard that? Do you see it feels a little different? It's disarming because, in a sense, by saying, you're right, I probably should listen better, you're actually listening. That means you heard them. You get it? It's quite disarming. So if you can, when you're with someone, try to find some truth in what it is that they're telling you, even if you disagree with most of it. Try to find some truth in what they're saying. There's something there, so you can take that in. Otherwise, you're just going to be talking to people with the same opinions you have and the same beliefs you have, and you're missing it. That willingness to be open to somebody else, even the open to their complaint, when it comes from that place of an undefended nature, it enhances the relationship. That's what we all want. We want to be connected. And by not being defensive, even in the face of some criticism, there's this connection there that everybody is seeking. And again, it's often a kind of, when you do your speaking, it's a kind of honesty. You have to bring forth honesty in your vulnerability, and often things that aren't flattering to you. So, I know we talked about this before with Jennifer, but there are times in your life when vulnerability is extremely important to grow. And that, we all know what Maryland crabs are, right? Maryland blue crab. If you talk to people who don't understand how crabs grow, I mean, I used to live on the water, and people say, oh, look at that little crab. Boy, when it gets to be this big, then we can eat it. And I say, it's never going to get to be that big. They say, what do you mean it's never going to be good? That crab will never be that crab. They say, why not? He says, because that's not how it works. Crabs, when they're this little, scurry around and they float around, and then what happens is their shells become calcified, and they become harder and harder and harder, and then they can't grow anymore. And the only way they can grow, since they continue to grow, is they're pressing against this restriction, is to slough the shell. And when they slough the shell, that's when they grow. In other words, then they can really spread out. But unfortunately, while they're growing, they're completely helpless. And they're very vulnerable. It's called a soft shell crab. And when they're ready to slough, they kind of go over to the tall grass, and then they slough, and they kind of like, gee, I hope nobody picks me up and puts me in a pan. Because they're completely vulnerable. They have no defenses. They can't even move. But they're growing, you see? And then they grow to the next size, and as they do this, the shell starts to calcify again, and they get to be what's called a leatherback. Not very good eating, but at least they can swim, and they can defend themselves. But they'll get to another place where that crab will get to about this big, and it won't be able to grow anymore. And it just won't. And then it'll have to slough again. And it'll be vulnerable again. Haven't you ever felt this in stages in your life when you were very comfortable? I mean, just think about being about 11 or 12 years old. You've been in this body for a number of years. You're cool with it. You know how to do it. You're got balance, your coordination. You're like in the 5th or 6th grade. You know, for me, when I was a 6th grader before I went to junior high, I was like, we own the school. I was so cool. It was like I finally... What happens after that? Puberty. What's with this? You know, your nose grows faster than the rest of your head. It's like, what? Zits? All these changes? You're so insecure. Does anyone not remember this? That's me. My worst torture would have to be to go back to junior high. Other people are growing and I'm not. And, you know, it's like, what's going on here? And you're so vulnerable. But that's really important for your growth. That's the only way you can actually become an adult, is you have to go through this uneasy, uncomfortable, vulnerable period. And it's very hard to be honest at that time. It's very hard to, you know, this is where people really shut down. And other people can be cruel. But to let yourself feel what you feel and to be able to talk about it is partly what helps you get through it. And it happens again and again. Haven't you ever been in a job and it's that same thing? The shell is there, you're kind of comfortable and you're safe, but like, I can't grow here. But I don't know what's next. And the next thing is going to be much more vulnerable. But I'm telling you, I'm done with this. You see, you just can't. You can feel the restrictions because it is your nature to grow. And you have to slough. We all have to slough. You have to throw it off. And in that stage, you will be very vulnerable. And that's where your growth will happen. That's where you can really stretch out and spread. So I'm going to finish with a song that I know Jennifer really liked. She said she listened to this every day during her treatment. And it's very much about this. It's about vulnerability and being the witness. It's called I Am the Witness.
I wake up in the morning in my bed, and there is silence in my head. I hear the sound of birds starting their day. I only wish this peace would stay. But thoughts I've heard before come knocking at my door. My day's begun, I must be on my way. The conversation never really ends. Transmission on and stuck on send. The judgments and the comments all continue. Feels like it's in you time and again. But am I just these thoughts, the feelings that are wrought? Who's listening to the voice that sounds like me? I am the witness. I am the witness. I am the witness. If I keep myself open, tell my heart not to close, then the thoughts and the feelings may all come and go, and come and go, and I am the witness. I am the witness. I am the witness. So many things on which I still depend. My rights and wrongs are my bookends. Avoiding pain and hurt implies protection. I lose direction in the end. To open up a space, a heart that's filled with grace, requires that I make room for it all. I am the witness. I am the witness. I am the witness. Thank you.